Okay. And we're live. Good evening. I've got Paul Funnell here with me today. He's ex-councillor of Wagga Wagga and also a farmer from Collingullie. So we're just going to have a bit of a discussion as to what's been going on with the shenanigans of the last week. Paul, if you could just walk me back to the lead up to the boycott that we had in Wagga Wagga last Wednesday.
Right, that'd be fine. Good night. Evening, Ingrid, and evening to anyone who's listening in and watching tonight. It's a complex process, but so I'll try and make it very simplistic for everybody. It was to do with the Reconnecting Rivers program. Now, I'm not sure who's up to speed and who's not, so I'll just try and do a quick summary of the whole situation. So under the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, going back many years, but then fast forwarding to 2 to 3 years ago, the department, which is the Climate Change and Energy, we'll just call them for that for tonight because they've all got different names, but they're all interconnected through DPI. So they instituted a program called Reconnecting Rivers, which was born out of the Constraints Management Program. So this is why I'm saying we just have to try and keep it narrow. And it's about delivering water downstream to the lower lakes. They'll argue that it's, to water some of the higher billabongs further downstream beyond Narandra and down around Balranald and those areas. So they engage the services of local land services to supposedly go out and harvest information as a snapshot to get just a test sample of what imposition or what effects it would be on, as I said, a snapshot of landholders on the Murrumbidgee if they ran higher rivers. And they did modelling to 45,000 megs, which is approximately a 6 metre river past Wagga. So and they did modelling, and in fact, I know there's different feedback from different people. In some cases, it was appallingly inaccurate. I must say, on my property, now I'm 30 k's west of Wagga, I'm between Collingullie and Currawarna, right on the Murrumbidgee. They're incredibly accurate, but I'm very suspicious of that, but I'll come back to that in a minute. So they went around garnering this information, and that was meant to be a snapshot to give to the bureaucrats to then take to the basin plan, because this was all, as I said, it was all about delivering higher, longer running rivers to get this environmental flows down. But what's taken place now, as we found out by mistake, and luckily we did find out, so it's thanks to the likes of yourself, Ingrid, and Wayne and others that are involved, that even though I'd been a participant in it, I'd been a board director with LLS, so I've been involved as a participant in this. And yet, what people such as yourself discovered only 10 days ago was there were these meetings to be held in Wagga. Well, there was some in Deniliquin, Wagga for 2 days, and I think it was Dubbo. I could be wrong on the third one. But the Office of Climate Change and Energy were holding these 1 hour sessions, but they were breaking people into groups of 3 or 4. So it's the old divide and conquer. And these meetings were apparently about to inform us so that we could put submissions in on the draft document, which would build the business case. So bear with me here, that would build the business case to be handed down by the Minister in February next year, which would show the flow regime that they had decided upon, and they could then discuss compensation for people who were affected by it. Now, none of us knew about it. None of us knew anything about it, even those participating. As recent as last Monday, I contacted Tom White from LLS, who was the fellow going around harvesting this information, who could not answer any questions in the 2 to 3 years we conducted this process. And he said, oh, well, if you don't know about it, I'll send you a package, let me know, check your emails. Well, of course, there was nothing there. But also, it should not have been a public hall. I mean, it should not have been these small meetings. But not only that, you had to register. Now, if you didn't know about it, how could you register? And if you didn't register, you couldn't participate. So there was one meeting at 3:30 on Wednesday. So he did send me the information. I actually went online, registered, went through the process. That was about Wednesday by that stage. the previous week, that is. And a couple of others had registered, but then of course other people want to come along as well, because as we all know, in a public meeting, particularly with something as complex and diverse and so important such as this, I mean, this affects everyone's livelihoods, their way of life, their property. This is fundamental property rights. That's what this is about, because they're going to create easements across private land. I was saving the best to last, really, for want of a better word. That's what this is about. This department, these bureaucrats, have made the decision they're going to create these easements across private land to force water. So in other words, flood us out, to deliver water downstream. So because the meetings were then closed to many people, and then of course yourself, Wayne, Deb Payton, Johnny Blackwell, Tom Kelsall, Trish Cookson, myself, a group of us, as you're fully aware, obviously, Ingrid, got together. Thank you to the work that you and Wayne have done, because that's what's pulled this together. And we said, well, you know, we started asking many questions of the department. I know Deb and Lucky sent in a list of 19 or 21 questions, I think it was, ahead of time. They've had them for 3 weeks, still can't answer them. So obviously the department got nervous because they realised, well, they didn't get away with their sneaky little trick. I mean, this is so typical of government departments these days, where they not only divide and conquer, but they do a box ticking exercise. So if you just bear with me a second to give the example of that. So if you look at the time frame, say we hadn't come across these meetings, and we didn't do the protest the other day and boycott the other day, it would have just gone through. Now, unfortunately, the way it's structured, and this is not just for us, this is for any government department doing these types of things, silence on it is acceptance of that you agree with what they're doing. So if no one turns up, it's considered, okay, everyone's accepted because everyone's seen it, blah, blah, blah. Now, the time frame that was set down for me by Tom White was that submissions are open until the 27th of October. And then once those submissions close, the department would build the business case to put to the basin plan. The minister would then deliver early February the flow regime and begin negotiations on compensation. Now, as I put quite clearly to them in no uncertain terms, that we all know for a start, so if you look at the timeline on that, the end of October, well, that's only 4 weeks away or a fraction under. There's not a government worker or a bureaucrat anywhere that I know of, or department, that really operates anywhere from about the 14th of December through to the end of January. Now, I'm not having a personal shot at them or anything like that. That's just a simple fact. I know even from experience from council, etc., often people on annual leave, businesses everywhere go on to small scale process during January for obvious reasons, because you've got the Christmas New Year period. So nothing really fires up until sort of towards probably the last week of January. So the fact that you've really only got, or they only had basically 6 weeks, meaning from the end of October to mid-December, to actually build this case and put it all forward, it's my opinion they already know what the flow regimes are that they want. They already know what they want to do. But what would have happened, the minister would have handed down her findings, so whether it be Rose Jackson at State Parliament or whomever, to start this process, that would have been handed down early February. We would have then heard about it and obviously gone off our heads about it. But of course, then the minister would say, well, you didn't attend anything, because the bureaucrats would have been able to say, oh, look, we held these meetings, but no one turned up. And of course, then we didn't have a case. But this is why this sneaky tactic of holding these little small meetings, I still do not know where they are advertised. Now, I listen to the radio every day. I do follow the local paper, be it online, and I know many people who do. I don't know anyone yet, not one person, who knew about them. No one. And I did a quick tally around just around my property here. Now, I've got 11 neighbours within about 10k radius. I checked with every single one of them, and there was one person who's immediately next door. He said, some bloke from Albury emailed me something a few weeks ago. He said, I don't know what it is. He didn't tell me. That was the extent of the consultation so that's all we know. So that, and I'll take a breath here in a second. Sorry, Ingrid. So that's how
Yeah,
it
you're right.
came to be. So that's how it came to be. So therefore, once we got together the other day to start discussing how we're going to approach this, that's why we said, well, no, we contacted different members of our group, contacted the department, said, no, we want a public hall meeting. We're still going. We'd set our time aside. We were registered at 3:30. And then on Tuesday, so we were supposed to be there at Wednesday, 3:30. On Tuesday, I got a text message saying, I know due to logistics and technical issues, it's been rescheduled to an online forum, to a webinar. Well, you just saw what we went through here just now to simply start this. So I apologise, everyone. It's my fault on my end because we've got pathetic signal here at the best of times. But that's still not acceptable. You know, we'd set our time aside. We had arranged other people. Other people wanted to attend, so we said, well, no, we're not going to go online. We went to the Mercure where we had pre-arranged it. To say logistics or technical issues, well, I'll call it for what it is. It's a lie. It's a complete lie because there was no issues, and the fact that they held other meetings, it just proves to me that they're just misleading. It's just such a typical government move. So that's, sorry about the long story, but it's just very important, the detail as to how we landed where we did. And it was great that there were 30 to 40 people turned up.
It was amazing that there were so many people turned up on such short notice because they all would have got some sort of message to say, or maybe they didn't, you know, it's been cancelled. And some of them turned out anyway, just in support of the boycott. So I think we had the room, you know, reasonably full, somewhere around about 30 people there. Some people hung around for a while and then didn't stay for the meeting. So there was actually more there than were actually viewed in that room. So that's a big shout out to those people that did turn up because it did send a strong message. I was pleasantly surprised that the mainstream media actually supported the breaking news, I guess. I didn't think that they would turn up, and they did.
Yeah. Oh, no, they were very much on side. They were, I mean, some of the mainstream media, obviously a couple of the younger ones aren't that familiar with the Murray-Darling Basin Plan because normally, look, some of us have been involved in this battle going back as far as 2006, 2008. And particularly around here, around Collingullie, we really hit the ground running sort of the 2012 through to 2016. It was over groundwater, but it was also over because there was discussion started again because a couple of the fellows involved here, I think it was Troy Stone, Dave Goldman, and God rest his soul, Johnny Peterson, had discovered a document where the Basin Plan were considering these, well, not considering, they were modelling these environmental flows. And in fact, there is a modelling. We still have a copy of that document, which we even got in strife off the Basin Plan at the time. In fact, one of the directors at the time saying, well, you know, how did you get that document? We said, well, it's a public document that came from the federal parliament, because that's something that's very important in this debate. This is all federally driven, but the states do the groundwork, so to speak. And this is why it's so difficult to nail them down on it, because they play the political football with it. For example, in that document, it actually states where there was modelling done to 86,000 megs a day past water. Now that's a major flood. They're saying now, no, look, that was just a hypothetical, but I think we've all been around these government departments and bureaucrats long enough to know that if there's something there, someone in the back of their mind somewhere is considering this one day. That became pretty ugly, that battle. It started out over groundwater because we were one of the last aquifers to be basically screwed over by the Basin Plan. We've got an underutilised aquifer here, but they still put restrictions on it. It's so complex to go into, as I'm sure a lot of you, such as yourself and a lot of your listeners, would be aware of. And this is one of the problems with the Basin Plan. It's complex, it's about water. People's eyes start to glaze over because it is just such a complex issue to try and debate. And people keep running down different rabbit holes and you can't nail them down. But during that period, that's where we learned about these environmental flows. And it was a group here around Collingullie that said, you know, if you continue or if you decide to push this water across private lands, we will sue you. And in fact, the whole of Commonwealth Water and I think it was Office of Environment Heritage at the time, as a state level. In fact, it was at the Mercure. We had a meeting there, and CHU, as we came to know them, the Commonwealth water holders, left the meeting because we put them on notice at the time, and they said they knew nothing about it. Now that's going back to probably 2016 or 2017. And so what they have then turned around and said, well, you know, if you're going to sue us, we're going to put these easements over your land, and then you can't. Now, easements over private land, this is just, I guess it's the long march of the government through our lives. I think, digressing a little bit, it's sad if you look at every section of government, the government institution, they're just in our lives, the red tape, the green tape, the emboldenment of these bureaucrats is incredible. Where are the politicians? Where's the minister? We're not hearing anything from there. The bureaucrats, and I'm not just picking on the ones that we've been dealing with this week, you know, with climate change and energy. It's in every department now. They just seem to be so emboldened that they're making the decisions. And the way I put it, I basically believe the inmates are in charge of the asylum. They're running the asylum because you can't nail a politician down. I'll give Joe McGurr his dues. I've had a number of conversations with Joe, and he's fully supportive of us in our situation over the consultation. He was adamant. He's had multiple meetings with different growers over this for a number of weeks, which was to my joy, I guess, to hear that he is across this. And I believe he's had meetings with the minister and certainly with the shadow minister, and has said, and he was quite adamant that we must be consulted. And as we know, they have failed miserably. And in fact, thinking of those webinars, I believe Joe went on the webinar on Wednesday. It was either Wednesday morning or Tuesday. I'll be corrected on that, but it was earlier this week. There was only two people on it. There was himself and one other person who's been involved in this industry, but it's not for me to name who they are. And apparently they really go to the bureaucrats dressing down and saying this was appalling, the whole process. So Joe's across it, but sadly at a federal level, Deb contacted Michael McCormack's office and explained the situation. And of course, typically from the federal sphere, and this is what I talk about the political football, his response was quite simple. He said, look, it's a state issue. I'll contact Joe McGurr and make sure he gets in contact with you. Now, that's not acceptable because it's actually a federal issue. This entire plan, this program is actually being funded by the federal government. The state are just doing the groundwork. So even if they do constraints management, meaning put a few crossings in or bridges or whatever they're doing, the state doesn't have the money. They do the groundwork, the feds then fund it. So for Mr. McCormack to turn around and say, oh, look, it's not our problem, but I'll just pass it off to the state, that is completely unacceptable. I believe this needs to actually be elevated to a position in conjunction with other issues that Australian agriculture is facing. As one person put it the other night, or the other day, this is New South Wales Franklin Dam, because this is fundamental property rights of every river dweller along the entire length of the Murrumbidgee River. But not only that, once you open that Pandora's box and they start putting easements over private land that, one, you don't have control over, you have to ask permission, you have to get permits to do any works on that, it's still on your land, you still pay rates, and yet you have no rights over it. Then you add to that, such as we know about, we're not jumping at shadows, but we know what else is coming. There's the enforcement of riparian laws. There's now the cultural waters, the cultural watering. There's the actual cultural programs that come with that. There's a complete and utter attack on agriculture at every level by every section of government now. And whether it be the easements, whether it be, the chemical licensing, whether it be solar farms, wind farms, regulation, we are just so under attack now that it is basically impossible. This is to actually do business. This is why young people can't get into farming now. It's becoming corporatized, but the family farm is gone. There's very few left. And yet, what's interesting with this, and sorry, I digress 1 second. This is not just about the Murrumbidgee River. This is the Murray River, the Edwards River. This is the entire basin. So this is the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. Mm-hmm. This is the entire sector, because once they start easements over us, Don't think they're going to stop there. And all they're doing is actually destroying the river system to try and save a section downstream. The longer, the higher the rivers, they're creating more and more trouble, more problems. There's more constraints in the river now than there was 10 years ago, because there's these beautiful ancient old red gums falling in, there's bank erosion, and every time one of those trees fall in, I've got some here on my property or on the embankments of my property that all but reach the other side of the river. And there's multiples of them that are constantly going in, but you're not allowed to touch anything. See, this is the stupidity of it all. So I believe this needs to become a federal election issue. We've got an election coming up. The feds can stop this nonsense, because what's actually driving it, as I've managed to find out, is that because the feds want to do water buybacks, but obviously from the agricultural industry, we don't want that, we don't need that, we can't afford that. They've already stripped billions of dollars out of our productivity. So the state have turned around and said, right, well, we won't do buybacks, but what we'll do, we'll just get more water down there, but we'll do it by pushing it across private lands. So therefore they need, so they're trying to say to the feds up the top here, we can fix your problem, but we're going to really do over private landholders, because these are bureaucrats who have drunk the Kool-Aid. Yeah, they're just off in Disneyland somewhere thinking they can do this. And it's time for everyone to put their foot down. And because this will have flow-on effects. Yes, there's a few thousand of us live along the river, just one river, let alone the tens of thousands along all the rivers. But this will start to impact businesses in town. This will start to impact families and incomes. This is a major, major issue. And once a government decides it can run roughshod over citizens by taking away their fundamental property rights, don't think for a second they're going to stop there. So this is really important situation, and I think it's time to stop. Well, I don't think it is. It's time to say no more. And if necessary, we have to start closing gates, as they did through the coal seam gas issues. We have to shut the gate. Do not let these people in. But I guess on the flip side of all this, I must say, we have to be proactive in dealing with these people, because what has been put to the department was that, yes, we're open to negotiate, we're open to discussion. We are saying no to easements, that's clear, just no easements. But obviously we would like to have a proper discussion. So it was offered to them the other day. Deb Blackwell wrote to the to the director of the department and said, look, apparently they were concerned about, I'm assuming this, and the world's greatest mistakes are made upon assumptions. They must have been a bit concerned about, a bit of sheep yard language or cattle yard language or something. So, for a start, they need people to come out that have done a little bit of resilience training, because you're dealing with real people here who've gone to hell and back on the land. And if they can't handle a little bit of colourful language or something, I'm not necessarily condoning it in public situations, but they have really pushed people to the limit. They've pushed people to the edge. They mustn't read newspapers or hear the media themselves, because the amount of suicides and depression in rural Australia, it has outstripped anything else. And this is why, because the government is just pushing us over the edge. But anyhow, back to the point. So Deb offered to them that, look, what we want is a public hall style meeting, not this little divide and conquer and 3 or 4 people here, because as I said, as you can tell, I can talk away off an iron pot, but other people are very quiet. Some people might have no questions, some might have 20. But when you get in a public hall, so sorry, if you're in this small minority group, like a 3 or 4 group, the meek and mild will go, okay, well, and if they're not across it, well, they don't even know what to ask. Whereas in a public meeting situation, people bounce off each other. And if it takes 1 hour, if it takes 10 hours, so what? We're talking about people's livelihoods here, not just for the next week or so. This is in perpetuity. That's the other issue here. This is forever. Because once this is signed, if people sign up to an easement, that's it. There's no removing it. It is forever. You have just devalued your property. In fact, in some cases, they would be worth nothing, because no one wants to buy a property that's an easement and there's people coming and going and there's water coming across, because we don't actually know how many times they're going to water it. They say it might be up to so many times every 5 years, whatever. There's too many ifs, buts and wheres and what I call it. So this is why we're saying we need a public meeting. Deb offered that actually offered up a husband, John Blackwell, Professor John Blackwell. I mean, he was a chief scientist, chief operator with CSIRO for close to 40 years. He's worked internationally. He's so highly qualified, run so many meetings. We basically offered him up on a platter to say, look, if you're concerned, we will offer someone to co-chair so that it's all kept nice, friendly, amicable, because we do want to work with the departments. We have to. We have no choice, really. I mean, and we live in a democracy, so it's the right thing to do. And the other part of that is also, it was offered that, look, a lot of us have a lot of questions. In fact, when I registered for the webinar, it asked the question, do you have any questions you can list here? Well, I actually answered, I have too many to list here, because I'm not a good typer, I'm a technology Neanderthal. That's the other issue about these webinars. The average age of farmers are 63 and above. I know that's the average, but I'm saying a lot of them are older. Technology is an issue, connectivity is an issue. But anyway, so that's just a by and by as part of that. So we've offered to give them the questions ahead of notice, to give them time to answer them. At this stage, at the stage when that was offered, they said they'll take that on notice. But just as an example, Devon, Johnny Blackwell, they gave them, it was either 19 or 21 questions. It's nearly 4 weeks ago now, and they said they've got 5 world-renowned experts working on them. They still haven't come back to them. So what hope were they going to expect in a webinar with 3 or 4 people? They can't bring answers back. Even just to send an answer into LLS, about cultural flows, they don't know. I did get an answer back to say, we actually don't know anything about it. I mean, seriously, come on. This is just nonsense. It's actually, it's malfeasance is the term I would come up with, because they tried to hide, they tried to sneak this through, they got caught out, they panicked, they ran for cover, then they rolled out the big guns and saying, oh, and by the way, after such and such a day, there will be no further consultation. That's the response. Well, good luck, because we're not going anywhere. We are here to stay. We're not accepting the easements. So we need to actually go back to the drawing board. We need to go one step back before the so-called consultation process. And actually, I'm sorry to say, go back to the beginning and start this process again. That starts with contacting every river dweller there is. So, and you yourself, to your credit, England, have proven, I know you put a lot of work into it. I think you know where I'm going here, but they have got hundreds, in fact, they've got thousands of people working for their departments. They've got billions of dollars of resources. We've got nothing. We've got each other. We've got businesses we're trying to run. We're trying to go to work. We're trying to make a living. And yet there you were able to put together, and with a few clicks of the button, after a lot of work, granted, you're able to bring up where we can actually find contacts along the river. I mean, LLS, for goodness sake, they have got every PIC number in New South Wales. They've got the details. There's the contact information. They send the rates out quite successfully every year. Put a letter in with that.
Yeah, I mean, they can find you for the money when they want it.
Yes. Yes, like Cuba Gooding Jr. Show me the money. They're good at that.
Yeah,
but
that's
this is where
I know exactly where you are.
Oh, yes, and they'll find you, don't you worry. But this is where the departments are breaking down badly. They've become so bureaucratic that I have very little respect for the government departments anymore. Look, there's good people in there, don't get me wrong. But this business, I'm just doing the job, I don't accept that anymore. This is an actual attack, as I said, on fundamental property rights. This is an attack on the Australian people and our way of life. And it's just doing everybody in. And it has to stop, and it's going to stop, and it stops now. I'll take a breath. Sorry.
Yeah, I think they were caught completely on the hop. I think they thought they were going to sneak it through. No one would notice, and it'd all be too late for us. We wouldn't have any form of recourse.
Correct.
Yeah, I just think it was a really, really nefarious wheels turning behind the scenes there. And I think there was a few surprised people when so many people wanted to actually engage. Obviously trying to catch up, because it takes a bit to wrap your head around what they're actually planning to do.
Well,
I
you're
don't
correct.
think people realise how serious it is.
No, you're spot on, Ingrid, because you think about it now, you've done a lot of reading, a lot of research yourself, and I really take my hat off to you with where you're at with the knowledge on this. But just with the few short conversations that you and I and the others have had in the past week, is, we're already starting to have to read, just terms compensation legislation.
What is that?
Well, correct. What is that? What is just terms? And even on that, is it state? It's now been updated. So we've now got to go back to that. That's actually under review at the state level. And what was found out 48 hours ago?
So sneaky.
Submissions closed back in May on just terms legislation. Now, how is this possible? This is going on. That's what I'm talking about. We're under attack at every level. And then on top of that, you've got the just terms legislation we've got to look at. We've actually got to find out what the flow regime is. You can't build a business case if you don't know what you're dealing with. And to say it might be this or it might be that, you can't do that in 1 hour in one submission. I mean, every person has a different effect on their property. What affects me is entirely different to you and entirely different to someone that has got 40,000 acres versus someone that's got 1 acre. But it's still pertinent and still relevant. And in fact, the smaller the property, the greater the effect. Because, well, in some cases, obviously, but in a lot of cases, because when you think about that, if you've got a small property, you're obviously into intensive agriculture or horticulture or whatever it is you're into, but it's a smaller area. So if you lose a section of that, it's a greater percentage of your land versus someone who's got 10,000 acres. It doesn't make it more or less important because everyone has a connection to their land for whatever reason. And it's not just the business side of it. So, okay, someone might have a couple of thousand acres and only a very small portion of their property might require an easement. And they think, oh, okay, well, don't worry about it, it's fine, we're not concerned. But even if it had a more major effect, they have the opportunity to shift cattle, shift sheep, do whatever. But again, they have geared their business to utilise their land. The disruption to that land could be greater than the person that loses half their property because we don't know what their business model is. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about because it has other flow-on, pardon the pun, flow-on effects. I used to contract to a gentleman downstream from here. I won't use names here, but he also owns a property up in the mountains and he runs cattle, has done, in fact, his family has been a famous cattle family for 100 years in Australia, over 100 years in Australia. And of course, in the mountains, as we know, you don't always get the great feeds, you don't get the rains right, the climate's not perfect. And of course, agriculture is such, we have to run to capacity at all times. Now, this gentleman is in his late 70s. He's about 5th generation, I think, cattle breeder, or might even be 6th. And now his sons are involved. So it's not like they're new to the game. They know how to do it and they have cattle up there, but they also have this property downstream from here, which is where they grow their fodder, etc. So through the winter they can, so it's not actually a feedlot up there, but and they have cattle on the road, they have land out west. But this way they use down here as their fodder production. So this property just west of me, or downstream from me, if that has easements go over it and then has environmental flows go over it, it will cut his centre pivots clean in half. Now, you can't water half a paddock, you can't spray half a paddock, you can't cut half a paddock, but you've then got those pivots out of production for possibly up to 2 years because the lipia comes in, the spiny burr comes in, the weeds come in, so you've got to tear all that out, you've then got to clean the paddock, you've then got to re-establish pasture, so you can be up to 2 years out of production. Next thing you know, they'll send another environmental flow down and you've got to do it again. So you never get back to production. My point being though, if you remove that section out of his business model, so the fodder's gone, how does he supplement feed his cattle that he's been doing, his family been doing for over 100 years in the mountains and out west? So this is what the departments and these bureaucrats and others have got to understand. Every property is different. It's just as important to the person with 1 acre or the person with 1 million acres. It makes no difference. The business model has flow-on effects that have, I'll call it third-party affectation, that if you remove that, his business model collapses. But if they turned around and said, "Oh, we'll give you a few bucks, per hectare for a bit of water going across your land, downstream the gully," well, no, you've got to look at the fact that it's completely shut down a multi-million-dollar business that works on 3 sites. I've brought these types of things up during the so-called consultation process, the harvesting of information, which turns out, I believe, was just the tiniest snapshot, and it was never meant to be what they were going to build it on. My understanding as a participant was that harvesting of information and such things as that was put forward was for them to consider, to then come back to us and say, okay, now we need to go down the river and talk to everybody. And yet they've left that middle part out. And that's why I'm feeling.
So it's like they've missed a step.
They've missed a couple of steps.
It's like they've missed a step. Yeah.
But I believe that's intentional.
It's a big leap. I do too.
I seriously believe it's
100%.
intentional because, as you said before, they tried to sneak this through. And had they got away with it, it'd be too late. There'd be nothing we could do. Well, yeah, go on, sorry.
Yeah, I work in water. So yes. I'm looking at emails and notices and stuff all day, every day, and I missed it. So it came across one of my co-workers' desk, and I was just lucky that she went, "I know you're interested in this," and flicked it to me. And I'm like, what the heck? And it's such a short time frame.
And you're in the industry now.
So normally they give you and they normally give you a number of weeks in order to sort of sign up for these things. But this time around, no. It was by design, 100% by design.
And that was the other thing with this snapshot, these participants such as myself. I'm led to believe there's 100 or 200 of us. I don't actually know, but I'm led to believe that. But the only reason I actually end up getting involved, now I was on the board of LNS, and that was a waste of my life. But anyway, that's a discussion for another day. I won't go down that path now. But I found, even though I knew about about environmental flows, etc., for some years, and then they discussed about putting in for this, tendering for this role, I found out they got it. And of course, then I naturally, as an irrigator, had a conflict of interest, but that's fine. We dealt with that at a board level. And then next thing, it was up and running, and it was brought to the board, and I said, "How can we be up and running? I wanted to participate, don't even know about it." "Oh no, we advertised." I said, "Where?" And I said, "But no one's contacted me." He said, "Oh no, you've got to apply." I said, "What?" I said, "You have to apply to participate." I said, "No, you should be door knocking We've been on about this door knocking now around the gully for, must be 15 years, saying they have to door knock everyone on the river. It's not hard. That's how you do proper consultation. No. And if they find it difficult, well, too bad. Suck it up and do the job properly. So I kicked up a stink. So all of a sudden they said, "Oh, all right, okay, we'll let you in. But I still didn't get the information at the end anyway. And so you had to apply to participate in it. You had to apply to register to go to a meeting. We didn't know about either application. No one did. So it's just such a farcical mess. And it's interesting, just over my left shoulder behind me, these clowns that run these things, it's an old education map. Actually, my wife found it somewhere. I'm showing my age, but they used to hang in school classrooms. That's actually got the Snowy Mountain Scheme and the river systems of New South Wales. I might suggest, it's probably 60 or 70 years old, that old thing, but I might suggest the departments maybe get one, and they might actually understand then just how big and how complex this is, because I really don't think they have got any concept whatsoever of what they're dealing with. They've drunk the Kool-Aid. They believe they've got the blinkers on. They're emboldened. These bureaucrats are so emboldened, they just take authority to run roughshod over anyone. Well, it's time for everyone to dig their heels in and say no. I don't care whether people are on the river or not on the river. I'm urging anyone to stand their ground and say, we've had enough. In this country, we have had enough. Because a simple statistic, less than 3% of Australians are involved in agriculture, and yet we feed 4 times our national population. Now, you think about that. That's the enormity of this industry, and we are just under attack That's the other reason the government don't care about us, because even, I know it's like trying to herd wild cats, trying to get a bunch of farms together at a meeting or anything, and I say that with all due respect. It's because everyone's too busy and think we haven't got time for that. But there's so few of us that they just think there's no votes there anyway, or they'll just vote for the National Party, or they'll vote for whoever. Well, no, not anymore. We're going to get the people together.
Yeah, you need to get educated.
And educate people. And thank you for doing this, because this is a way, it's a start. As I said at the outset, I know water, people's eyes glaze over because it's a complex issue, but it's the fundamental of life. Food is the fundamental of life. Someone gave me a statistic, I think at our meeting the other night, that I think the Murrumbidgee produces $5 billion worth of productivity annually. I mean, you start taking
That's right, Paul.
Where's our economy going? Look what they did to the
1% of GDP.
There you go, on one river. And they want to put easements over and flood us out. I mean, how unintelligent is that? So, as I said,
our farmers definitely punch above their weight. Like for them to be doing 1% of GDP is enormous.
Absolutely.
And they really need to wake up right now, because their livelihoods are absolutely threatened right now. They need to stand up, and they need to get educated, and they need to know what's going on, because they're looking at their businesses are going to suffer. That's for sure.
Oh, the businesses will suffer, and then ultimately the communities will suffer. Then the everyday people will suffer. So there's a lot of talk from me, I know, but the upshot of this is, and thank you because you're involved, and I'd say the groundbreaker on it. So effective of last night, we have it's not official yet, obviously, we've still got to finalise paperwork and incorporations, etc. But we have set up a group. We will be contacting people left, right and centre. It's to save our river dwellers. So sword, live by the sword or die by the sword. But please, whoever's watching, whoever follows this, there'll be links set out. Ingrid is probably more than one to tell you, because as I said, I'm a technology Neanderthal. Might be a lobbyist and a loudmouth, but when it comes to technology, I'm limited, obviously. But seriously, we need to get people involved. Everyone has a role to play, even if it's just a name on a piece of paper to say, I don't want to speak up, I don't want to do this, I want to do this, but this affects us, we want to support this. Or even if it's to raise questions through the executive. It's really important people register and get that. And it's as simple, I believe, as when the link's set up as filling out your email address, and you'll get the relevant information. But we don't want hundreds, we want thousands. I want tens of thousands. You don't have to be a river dweller to be part of this. You only have to be a human being, because everyone's under attack. And don't think they're going to stop with us. That's not where it's going to stop. That's what's really driving this for me. I mean, I'm pretty much an overgrown hobby block farmer now, for multiple reasons. Well, part of it is Murray-Darling Basin Plan, but nonetheless, we have to stand our ground. So I will let you deal with that side of the technology of things and announcements, Ingrid, because you are a technical whiz kid. I'm quite
not really.
I'm
just fumbling my way through things. I'm 20 years past my prime when it comes to technology. But yeah, we do have the website set up, www.saveourrivers.org.au. There will be some big changes coming to that website in the next couple of days. We're planning to have a survey up, and we want to hear from everybody who's had any dealings with the LLS, what their experience was, whether they've just found out what's going on. We want to hear that too. If this is the first time you've heard about these programs happening and the big bad government trying to flood us, you'd think we were nuts if you heard that for the first time, like what these people going on about, until you find out it actually is true. It's terrifying. So get informed, jump on our website list of what we think the risks are going to be with the program if it proceeds. We really do need to get a big mailing list happening. We need to get people active. We need to get people talking to their neighbours about this, and just making sure that everyone's informed, because it's our grandkids and their kids and the kids after that. The stuff they're planning is for perpetuity. That means forever. So if you sign up, that's it. You've made the decision for the rest of your lineage. And if you're selling your farm, well, you've made the decision for the person who's going to buy it. So, yeah, I think it's very serious.
No, you're spot on. And in fact, when speaking to the broader community, as have been in some of our discussions, these environmental flows, you're creating wetlands, swamplands, etc. There's biosecurity issues. There's waterborne issues. They have no biosecurity plan. Why? We have to as a landholder. How are they going to deal with these issues if you start getting wetlands, mosquito-borne diseases? People say, "Oh, for goodness sake, come on, put your tinfoil hat away." This is not tinfoil hat stuff. This is reality. We've seen issues of Japanese encephalitis in the last couple of years. Well, if we're going to increase water issues and we've got an increase in population, what do people think is going to happen? So we have to have plans in place. Well, we don't, but the government should. It's a bit like council, and I know you're a council. Congratulations, we're in order, I believe, with council.
Thank you.
But
we'll see how we go.
But as many people have heard me say over the years, and I know councils are a bit more on this, but I always say stick to the 3 R's, the roads, rates and rubbish. But the same thing applies with state and federal government. Do your job. Don't worry about doing our job. Don't worry about destroying our lives. Do what you're there to do. Provide the fundamentals, then get out of our way. Let business and the private sector, the farming sector, I mean, this is not a political statement or anything, it's just a simple fact. You look at the number of agencies and bureaucrats, etc. I read a statistic in recent years that 40% of Australians are reliant upon the government for employment. I mean, what the hell has happened to us? No wonder our GDP has gone down. No wonder the actual personal wealth of each individual Australian has gone down. And I'm not picking sides or anything here. I'm just saying, government, get out of our lives. Do it fine. Put guidelines in place, but do it. Provide the fundamental infrastructure. Then let us do our job. And this is just another example. And this business of environmental flows, look, it's no good arguing with them on that because they've already got the blinkers on. But I'm telling you now, it's doing more damage than it is good. And in fact, some family members of mine or close to mine who are not involved in regional or rural activities, even when they come and visit and they see these ancient red gums that are falling in, and not just on rivers, but on lagoons, etc., they say, why? Because, I mean, granted, once human beings interfere with nature, yes, as someone said, you can't unscramble the egg. However, this is just throwing more and more and more water at it is not solving the issue. It's actually creating a problem. But even when they listen to what's going on and you talk about easements and loss of property rights, they instantly say, that's not right. How can they do that? I mean, this is akin. How would these bureaucrats feel if we just went into their backyards and said, we're just going to take your backyard. You can still pay the rates on it, but you're going to have to ask permission to do anything in your backyard. And by the way, every few months, we're just going to run water through here. Then you're going to have to clean it up. You're going to have to fix it. I mean, they would scream blue murder. They go out on stress leave or something, or some, or have to work from home, or just do some weakling thing, or say we need counselling or something. They need to put some, a teaspoon of cement powder on their Wheaties of a morning, and toughen up a bit. And they need to actually get out and have a look. Seriously, they all need to toughen up a little bit. And that's why we say they talk about resilience training. Everyone's offended, etc. Blah blah blah. Well, first of all, stop listening to the ABC. If they don't want to hear bad language, and I've got no issue with the ABC. I'm just saying as an example. Think about who they're dealing with. What they're dealing with. As you said, this is going to impact generations. So that's where we're at. I guess it's watch this space, but we have to act quickly. We need people to step up. We really do. As I said, register, get informed, ask questions. We'll do what we can. but we're in for the long haul here. If there's injunctions required, that will be taking place. We will do what it takes, but we're in for the long haul. We're in for the fight. So I'm sorry to talk everyone's head off, but that's where we're at.
That's all right. Paul, we might wrap it up there for the night. People are probably getting a little tired. We've gone for 50 minutes already.
Oh my goodness, I'm sorry.
But I'll have to get you back.
Don't make me in front of the microphone. Sorry about that. But anyway, but look, thank you, Ingrid, for the work you're doing. It's really appreciated. We can't do it without you.
No worries.
All right.
No problem.
Good night,
We'll
everybody.
check back with you at a later date and see how we're going again. All right.
Very
good
good.
night.
Good on you. Thanks, Ingrid. Good night now. Bye.